Hi, everyone, and my name is Thiagu Palaniappan. I work at TriStar, today I thought of going through some of the top enhancements in Creo 10 that was released about a week ago. Before we start, I thought a quick note about TriStar. We are a company that helps manufacturing companies, adopt software systems and processes to enable more efficient and better product development. And we do this by being the largest value-added resellers for PTC, right? And we are headquartered in Arizona and Phoenix, and I'm based in the Chicago area, been presenting quite a lot of these Badgerland user group and different PTC user groups in the country. And so our team is fully aligned to the PTC product line, like Windchill implementation, Creo training services, and some additional apps that we support. Real quick here, before I start showing you the key enhancements, the key themes by PTC on Creo 2.0 is obviously your core areas with productivity and usability enhancements, right? And then they do have plans for a composite design and manufacturing extension that's supposed to be released in a later date code, not in the initial one. So I'm not able to show you that today since it's not yet released. But there are some, design for composites. The plan is to have design for electrification. There's so much of EV these days, and the cabling side, there's some focus on the cabling module. There's some improvements in that. Ergonomics with mannequin, and obviously MBD, GD&T advisor, easy tolerance, right? Simulation extensions and manufacturing extensions, both additive as well as the traditional subtractive manufacturing. So those are the key themes that PTC focused on. If I have to list out different areas, where they enhanced, it could just be one or two enhancements in certain areas, but here's a complete listing of the different topics or areas in which Creo 10 was improved compared to Creo 9. Before I show, I thought, many of you may be using Windchill, obviously, to manage your files. So it's important before you upgrade to Creo 10, as you know, to check the Windchill compatibility with Creo 10. And this is the latest I got this morning from PTC support page, which is we encourage you to look there before you start downloading and start using it. It's a good practice to obviously have your IT and admins. They're probably already checking it, but it's supposed to be compatible starting Windchill 12.02.11 and 12.1.2.1 as well, right? As for Creo itself, I know most of you may be on Creo 7 or 8 or 9. Creo 10 was released, every April, as you know, it was released last week, but springtime, PTC is going to get a new release. It's a yearly release cycle these days. And in 10.01, now there's going to be a new extension that'll be released in about 3 months from now. All the other, just a quick screenshot from the PTC product calendar. I just took some screenshots so everybody's aware kind of how Creo 9 has been maturing and the different date codes in there. Almost every 3 months, you're going to see a date code. The latest is 9040. Same thing with Creo 8 that was released a couple of years ago in April of 2021, and Creo 7 released back in 2020 there, right? So with that said, let's get into the main one. First, I don't know how much I'll be able to cover. Like Deb said, we'll probably have a Q&A session towards the end, but I'll try to at least focus mainly on the core areas, and if time permits, we'll also go through some of the extensions depending on that. I will be switching between the slides and mainly be spending time in the demos, but just to highlight a few very, very high-level UI enhancements they did with the file open dialog box, where they kind of rearranged the layout a bit here. As you can see, the preview is on the side here. It's a horizontal one. And they got the quick access filters that I like right in here for parts, assemblies, and drawings. You still have your good old type option, but I like these quick filters that they have for the most commonly used subtypes of Creo files, as you know. And then on the left-hand side, they got the recent ones under a common folder now. And like how you can now the name of the type or application is displayed under type column, and you can also sort it by that, right, by that column. So let me just take a quick look at that. If I do a file open, and this Creo 10.000, right, the first date code that I have here, If let's say I'm going to go select one of the folders here, so maybe I'm going to go into let's see, one of the folders, or it could be even your Windchill workspace common space. I'm not connected to Windchill, so I don't see that here, but the first thing you see is, I'm able to, let me go to details like before, and let me just kind of resize this a bit. And you should be able to, there you go. The type is one option. I could sort by type that is not there before, right? That's an option there. You can sort by name, etc. But the type, nice to see that this name displayed there. You could say, okay, I want to filter by drawings. Right here, you got these three little quick filter icons. They also show up in the web browser too, right? In your embedded browser too, they show up if you browse to files to that method, so the file open, right? And they got the recent one that's included in here, under common folders. I usually use it where I could, when I demonstrate and when I, train customers, I do a lot of folders where I have saved some files, I prepared some files, so I would usually put in there, but recent files show up here. You still have your common folders, your network, your folder tree, etc. So it's just a quick one on the UI there. A few nice things on the Sketcher and part modeling. On the Sketcher side, many of you may know Creo 9. About a year ago, I may have presented what's in Creo 9. Project and offset tools were improved, if you remember. It is a new, shift selection to get the chain, and they kind of also improved upon that, or they broadened the support of the project and offset. For example, we can do that now with construction geometry inside the Sketcher. They have a really nice all curves in feature option, which used to be there way back in the days. It kind of lost, and it's now back on, where the system calculates during sketch what it means by all curves in feature chain, and it knows to collect multiple options or multiple features. It could be from a copy geom or from a shared data, or it could be even sketched. Maybe let's take a quick look at that. Sketcher. Let's see if I could open up a file here, so I'm in just a simple part here, but let's say I want to go sketch on the space, and you still have your project and offset as before, and this is a Creo 9.0 enhancement, right, where they use a chain selection, or you can use a rule-based option. It's much better than the old single chain loop option they had. So this is 9.0. However, the new one now is, once you pick one, and I know you can go hold down shift, and you can go from to, you can keep doing a right click, you can just go surface loop and all that. But when I hold down to continue the shift, I'm holding down the shift and I cursor over this other curve, the outside, the offset curve, it says all curves in feature chain. So when I do that, I was able to grab all that in one go. Or if you don't prefer the shift key, you have this little icon right here. And there they have this new rule-based selection, all curves in feature, right? That's kind of helpful there, right? So maybe I could, let's say I want to get to that, or maybe I do this, the Control Z, maybe I want to do another project or offset, right? On for example, this curve here, I could hold down the shift key, cursor over the others, and all curves in a feature chain. So that calculation is being made during when you start the sketch. So maybe that's all those could be part of my import feature. It could be part of my external copy geom, all of those. But the system understands, so you don't have to spend your time doing multiple loop selections. You can get all curves in a feature. So I think it's a nice little enhancement, I thought. And then the construction geometry is also supported for project and offset in Sketcher. And the workflows when you use like trajectory-based features like a sweep or a swept blend, for example, or a blend, you're now better able to use that project offset on curves that were created using intersect, or maybe imported like what I just showed you. And they have better information if your reference were to be lost during the sketching, right? The sketch loop references where they were lost, it will tell you it's missing, but what's wrong was not there inside of these sketch references before. So let's take a quick look at some of those. So for example, let's say I want to go to, let me just exit out of this. In my, I have some saved views here that I want to quickly get to. Maybe we'll just go into these right? So I need to do a sweep, and I'm going to create a new body through this. And I want to do a sweep. And when I do the sweep, I'm able to select the trajectory as before, right? Probably I want to have, it's a closed loop, so I'm going to have my start points that are here. And I'm going to use my mini toolbar that's introduced in Creo 6 and start sketching it, right? And at this point of time, maybe I do have a curve, as you can see, that blue curve that's probably done with the intersection, and I need part of that geometry. And I could use a new project tool, which is there in Creo 9, this new tool. However, now they support, for example, I probably want to go ahead and let's say select one of these curves. I want to get the single segment, or I can get the, see when I do the curve selection, I get the full segment if I want to. Maybe I'll do the single one for now. And once I select that, I'm able to use, a shift key, and I can keep toggling through it. Or this, I could also do this with the offset tool, right? It's not just with project. I could do it for the offset tool. Maybe I want to go pick from list in here. I got my curve, full curve, or just the curve. I probably want to give it a small clearance in there as I do this. So that's probably why I'm doing it this way, right? So I can also use a drag handle and give it a clearance, or I can hold down the shift key and I can keep right clicking on it. And I say, okay, that's what I want. And maybe I want to give it a, some value there that I want to make it a slightly larger than the earlier value there. And then I hit okay, and I'm done with it. So I'm giving a small clearance there. The intent behind this is maybe my goal would be to build something like a cover or some model in here. Let me just do something real quick here, just for a second. Maybe we'll just do some trim corner options here. Let's go, there it is, right? Something like that. And say I want to go and I just wanted to create this as a new, obviously, maybe let's say it's probably cutting into that. Somebody will probably drag this a bit with my dimensions here. There it is. And maybe I want to go and convert it to a new body in there. And maybe that's something I might want to also transparent. Some of these were there in Creo 9 itself, but the ability to use that curve during your cross section for offsets, or during your project tool for offset and project tool is new, right? So that's a nice one there. And also you could go, let me open up another one real quick here. When you run into issues with referencing in Sketcher, for example, I got a couple of parts here, so maybe I'm going to get rid of some, let me just delete some features here. I'll kind of suspend. So there's something that's failing, obviously, right? Looks like I had some parts that I was referencing and this other part, and I got some sketch that's failed. I'm going to do my little redefine or edit definition. And it says, one thing they improved in Creo 10 is instead of just telling you a complete loop, now it gives you a little bit of the surface belongs to which one. And in Creo 9, when they introduced that new project offset tool, it just said complete loop sometimes, but now it gives you a little more information. In this specific case, as you can see, I removed that vertex round, so that got removed, and I'm going to go replace this guy. It's a good practice to replace rather than delete and recreate, right? It's generally good practice. I'm going to start selecting, I get this partially defined one. In fact, I can right mouse click and say what's wrong. That's new in Creo 10, where I go to what's wrong, while in Sketcher, it kind of highlights and it tells me, okay, there you go, right? That's the missing one. So I kind of know, okay, so that's why it's failing there. So I at least know I can select this guy and kind of hold on my shift key, and I can just say, okay, maybe I want the entire loop in there, right? Or the boundary, and I can just solve it, and then we just kind of replaced it now, and you're good to go, right? So just some minor enhancements there. So let me just go back in here. One other improvement, which many of you may know if you've used Creo for a long time, or even the old Pro engineer days, the central lines, right? The good practice is always to use datum planes when making rotational patterns, because central lines always used to flip around when you try to pattern them, especially for a sketched hole, for a hole, or maybe for a circle like this. The central lines were not inconsistent, right? Once you go beyond a certain angle, have you seen the pattern? Sometimes it'll just go here, it won't go all the way through, and they have kind of improved that in Creo 10. And this doesn't work for central lines done in Creo 9. So I'll kind of first demonstrate the problem of a model that I created in Creo 9. So if I go to, let's see here, one of the files I'm going to open here. If you see this file, if I go to let's see if I go to my little, so I just wanted to, I have just some few demo files that I'm using here. And if I go into Sketch and the file that I just opened, you see here, let me open it with Notepad real quick. You know, this is a trick that many of you may know. Somebody sends you a file and you want to know what file that was, what version or release of Creo was saved on. It looks like it was saved on 9020, right? That particular file. I just opened it, right? And I'm looking at a sketch that's already done, and I'm going to go and, for example, start, maybe modifying the angle. Now, it looks like it's working fine, but there are times that, right now it seems to be for modification, regeneration seems to be working. Sometimes it might flip, sometimes it may not, right? That is a little bit unstable, and the best practice was to create a datum plane instead of a center line, right? So I'll kind of demonstrate the problem here is if you try to pattern it, for example, we'll just do a pattern, just give it some increment. I'll just go, maybe I want to have about 12, oops, not 1, it's 23, my bad. I want to have 12 of them in there, right? And you see what's happening here. It's kind of not going all the way to the other side due to the instability of that center line. So maybe I'll go delete my pattern here. And and the best practice is to use datum planes, of course, but I'm going to go also delete the sketch. And let's say I do a new sketch instead of Creo 10 on this Creo 9 model, right? So maybe we'll just do a quick, just using my Shift G shortcuts to convert it to a construction entity, right? So all this is there for a long time. So let's say we want to set it to some value here. I'll just probably sketch a circle, something like this in here. Maybe I'll just throw in a quick center line. And that way, got our angles, we got our, we'll just give it some known values real quick, right? There you go. There it is. Okay, so let's say set it to a specific value there. Okay, so that's done. And maybe it looks like I did the same thing that we had before, but in Creo 10. And now when I do my pattern, and then I select that, and let's say I want to give the number of them to be 12. It understands that, and it kind of, so it's not a big deal. I mean, most of us know this issue, and we used to work around datum planes, but it's nice that they have kind of fixed it finally. So that's the improved centerline behavior. They do have a new closed loop curve, which is a nice feature. There are some. The reason they have it is I'll talk about it in a minute or so as to why this is and what is a real application behind it. But I like the idea that you're able to quickly collect, all closed loop options on a datum plane or on a surface or on a quilt. Even for 3D curves, it will work, especially when you have a lot of entities like these that could be imported or sketched. As you can see here, which loop do you want? Do you want the loop here? Do you want this loop? It gives you automatic options. And let me kind of quickly, it's always good to see an example as to how that works. And these are some core modeling areas that I'm demonstrating. So let's just see, I'm going to go, I have a sketch that I'm going to unhide real quick. So you got some few lines in here. And let's say under datum, where you have your usual datum curves, they got that closed loop curve, which is a new feature in Creo 10.0. So for example, I could go into that curve. Where do you want to place it? It could be a body or a quilt. I'm selecting on that surface. And as for the boundary chain, I could select one edge, hold down the shift, grab that chain, and that's my boundary chain. But I could go hold down Control key and select additional ones. Now, as I keep adding additional chains, I get an option here, this little next toggle here, right? I get two options at this point, but I could continue to say, okay, let's go get this guy here. Now I can cycle through, or I'm essentially toggling, right? I'm just clicking these arrows, the left or right arrow, and it's telling, okay, do you want this? Do you want this, right? Do you want this one? Do you want this? You can see how those yellow highlighting options, or do you want just probably the inside one I want? And I got that created as a datum curve. Now, what would be a good application for this, right? Remember earlier in the presentation, I mentioned that PTC is kind of planning to have a composite design, and manufacturing environment or an extension starting 10.0.10 I was actually hoping it was in 10.000. That's why I'm unable to show you or talk about it, but at least that's where this could be applied, where to create your ply geometry, right? For adding that on, it could be on a surface like this, where to create your, the inner mold line geometry where you're going to place your plies. It's almost like you're manually placing plies, giving angles and material properties and thicknesses, doing, analysis work, etc., right? And also creating the flattened geometry. So that's where this could benefit, but it also works on a flat surface. So that's, it's available both in the regular part modeling, sheet metal environment, and in the composite design environment that'll be coming up in the next date code, actually. So that's where we could be using this technique. If you had been using multi-body, or those who are on Creo 7, you most likely already have probably been using multi-body. You may have seen that PTC did a big change in Creo 7 with multi-body. That was one of the biggest enhancements in Creo 7. And then if they've been improving, making minor improvements here and there, I like how they created this new trim option and combined with the splitting option. They used to have split and volume before, but now the split and trim are kind of combined. And what would be a good use case for that? Maybe let me just give you an example real quick here. If I go and let's see here, I got a couple of bodies in here. So for example, let me just go isolate this or hide this body. If you look at my design tree, I got my one body here. Let me go unhide this. I'll go hide this. So you got two bodies and they're intersecting at this point, right? Pretty straightforward, two bodies intersecting. And I do have, I know I can create a quick quilt, so I do have a quilt right in here. If I show the snapshot that they introduced in Creo 7 and 8, that's very helpful. You can, it's hidden, I can see. I'm going to use that quilt to trim it, right? So I can select the body a couple of ways, right? I can just go select the body right here, quilt or body, or I've configured my little, so if I go and customize or, maybe reset everything, recustomizations I did, you could always go, customize your mini toolbar as always, right? And I could say, okay, I like this selecting the quilt or the body by selecting a geometry. That's pretty nice, right? I can just drag and drop that guy over here. So that way I'm able to simply quickly get to that body. Now what I can do is I can do Boolean operations, right? Which is there in Creo 7, no big deal so far. But what's new is the split trim body option here, where they've combined both split and trim in one place right there. We can also use your mini toolbar for that, right? So I could say, okay, I want to go use the trim, or I want to split it. I want to go trim by which object? Maybe I want to split or trim it by that quilt, right? I just grab that hidden quilt that we had copied earlier, and I get to pick, right, which side, to trim, etc., and all that. And there you go, right? So that's one use case for the combined split trim body. You also have a flip option now when you split by volume. Split by volume was there before with multi-body, but flip option really allows you to control in situations where you might have some, geometry that fails during patterning. In fact, let me kind of explain that with an example where let me just go into the component here. See, let me just go into thumbnails so you can kind of see just a few examples and demo files that I can see here. I got all I have is in this body or in this component, a pattern of a coordinate system, and I'm going to do, let's say, an external copy jump and not publish jump. But I'm going to bring in, let's see here, we'll just bring in this particular component and as a body in here, and I'm going to go use, I got a coordinate system here and a coordinate system here for quick assembly, but I'm going to go select the body itself, right? I'm going to bring that in, there it is, right? So that looks good, but obviously we have a problem here, and again, I could have done that trim, and just to show you a few additional options, let's say I want to pattern this, right? I got this one external copy jump here that I'm going to go pattern. It should pick up my reference pattern of the coordinate system real quick, as you can see. that's pretty straightforward, but you could see the geometries here. There are 4 pieces below that surface. Here, there's a lot more geometry. So how's that trim going to work? Or let's give it a shot, right? So normally you would, in such situations, you probably want to go remove the intersecting geometry. So you pick the body and you probably do a Boolean subtraction, right? You want to subtract. It's nothing new in Creo 7, we had it, right? You want to subtract, and the modifying body is this one. You subtract the yellow body from that, and obviously it's getting consumed, and we don't want that, right? So we do have the keep bodies option, right? We will turn on, we'll keep it on right there, and there it is. And now if I go and make it transparent, you see what I'm getting at here, right? Compared to these guys, right? I remove that interference, for example. Now, can I just pattern this, right? I can just go continue with the pattern, and we did a reference pattern. I should have picked up the reference pattern, and that seemed to be working as well. Now, however, what I want to do is I want to use the split option by volume. If you remember in Creo 7, they had it, right? You have a split option by volume when you do multi-body. I can go split by volume, and if I go select any surface, I should be able to, it should know the intersection of the other body, and it should be able to split it. But now I have the trim option, and it nicely trims it. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to pick the volume, pick the surface, and it trimmed it, right? So that looks good. Now, the problem here is I'm going to deliberately do this to show you what the issue is if I try to pattern this guy, or if I do a reference pattern on this, that's where we seem to be having the problem. As you can see, it worked on the first one, it's working on this guy. However, here it failed, right? You know, if you think about it, the number of geometries, let me just go delete this pattern, right? And what would be a better way, and that's part of the enhancement here, right? When you go into this, I'm gonna delete this, this trim that we just did, okay? Do that, there it is. Yeah, I'm gonna kind of quickly delete that trim that we just did here. And a better option might be to select the other side and flip the trim, which was not there before. So what I could do is I could just go to my split body by volume, grab this end of the surface, right? But there is this flip option where I could say, even though that's the surface I've selected, I want you to kind of trim the other side, or actually do the trim, and get rid of the surface. And now when you do your pattern, if I do my pattern, or the reference pattern, should work nicely. The reason is it didn't matter how many geometry they had, especially on these curved geometries in there. We were able to select the side. The flip option was really nice in the volume split, you know, like that one. A few other things right in here on the multi-body, things like copying surface appearance and updating reference. If you do MBD, right? MBD is big in the industry these days, right? Especially when you start adding your product manufacturing information, or PMI, right, in your 3D model. You may have bodies that already have some, you know, some surface colors assigned, or some profile tolerance, right? You know, some GD&T applied, and you'd like to get that transferred over during the Boolean operation. So now we have, with the multi-body, the ability to turn on and off copy surfaces or update reference. So the way that works is, let me just go quickly open up another model here so you can take a look at that. So I do have, as you can see here, if I go isolate this, I got one body right in here. I got another body here. Let me just go isolate that guy, and that body has some color assigned to it, and some GTOLs in here, right, assigned. Okay, let me kind of undo that in here. So I'm going to do a simple subtract of one body from the other, right? So again, that's all I'm going to do now is I'm going to just go select the body, and I'm going to go, let's say I want to subtract. The modifying body is going to be this body here, and you see by default it's getting the color from that other body. Now that's turned on by default, but if I had turned it off, both the update reference and copy reference, as you can see, it takes its own color, and I don't see the GTOL. However, if I go back and redefine this guy and say, okay, I could also do that, by the way, in the mini toolbar, and say I want to use both the update reference and copy surface. As you can see, it was able to also transfer that to this body here. Once we subtracted that got consumed, we have only one body, but it was able to transfer the references and any annotations you have added to it. So that's another benefit here. And this would be a use case here where we could potentially bring that in, and it's you're starting to use those GTOLs as a reference, or keep that reference during your Boolean operations. Okay. A few other enhancements here are almost kind of done with the core areas, but some of the few more things in the core part modeling areas. The divide and unify, right? So many of you may know, if you've used Creo 9, that in Creo 9, they introduced the ability to create split surfaces, which was available only in simulation tools like Creo Simulate. In Creo 10, they further improved, or kind of, certain areas was very unstable, like a situation like this, where if you didn't have the boundary actually intersecting some surfaces, it was getting confused as to what to do with this geometry. The ID used to take us to the outside or the inside, but now it works better. And also, if you use flexible modeling extension, which is there in the base package these days, if you want to make some quick geometry editing on IGES or STEP, or maybe SolidWorks or non-Creo data, or even Creo data, really last-minute design changes using the geometry editing tool, how do you want that surface or split to behave? And it depends on, have you done the surface region before that or after the geometry? It's a little more of a predictable behavior now. So in fact, let me kind of quickly show that example here. If I go into the an example of the, let's see if I could open up. So here it is, I got a sketch, and this is the feature they had in Creo 9, right? The divide surface. And if I go to divide and I just select the surface in Creo 9, it would of course divide these guys and these because the curve is intersecting. But on all these, it used to be that sometimes we'll get the ID of the green surface, because right now, if you think about the ID, in fact, let me turn on my config option. There was many of you may know this, but those are unaware. You could say show ID. Let's see here, talking and typing. Let me just do a yes, show selected item ID. It's turned on. It's an old config. You can turn it on. I'm going to turn this to yes. And just want to show you what happens when you turn on the IDs or anything, whether it's a surface or an edge. You're going to see that little ID, and it's very important, right, for robust modeling, or modeling best practices, is to make sure the ID doesn't change. And of course, when we do a split, you could see that, let me go back to that feature and redefine it. And what that flip is really doing is in which surface side you want to create the new ID. And in Creo 9, it used to create, the new ID for these, like in this case, but these, the way it used to have is still have the ID of the outside, and it's nice that they kind of fix that one. And the other issue they had also with, let me see if I can open up a model here where I have a feature here, like just maybe I want to add an embosser and a text curved on that surface there. And I might want to split on this. I wanted to create that two surfaces there so you can see what will happen. So the split worked okay, but let me just go to the intent surface, and maybe I'll apply just so that we know, I'll apply a different color so we know it. There you go, right? So I did the divide surface, it's working okay. However, if I go to my sketch and let's say I want to edit, say we'll just push it a little bit. During normal modifications or any regeneration changes happen, it's a lot stable now, where even though those texts are getting it's getting different surface, it's falling on these two different surfaces, it still will maintain the ID and the color and everything between these two surfaces, which is not the case back in Creo 9. So just improving. It started in Creo 9, but in Creo 10 they've kind of made it a little bit better, I'd say, with the divide tool. And one last thing is, if you had, I'm sure many of you may use flexible modeling. That's essentially geometry editing, right? It comes in all base licenses these days. You can quickly just scroll through your mouse wheel to get to that tab, right? Right in there, you select your, for example, you can do geometry identification, pattern recognition, things like that. This could be a non-Creo file, could be a step or an IGES file. I can still make changes to it, right? Basic changes, I would say. So there, let's say I want to do a quick move on this guy, and maybe I want to just set the dragger here and I want to kind of move it. When I move this one, as you can see that the surface region still remains. This is one scenario where, right, it's like a pretty much more better predictable behavior, I should say, compared to before. Let me kind of maybe suppress this, suppress everything in here. And maybe I want to go resume. Maybe I'll just resume the this guy here. So now I have a different situation where I'm going to go select this one, and this is done before the split, of course, right? Or the geometry was done, so it was able to follow through. And now if I do my little move and say we'll just put it over here, as you know, it calculates a round geometry, so it knows to just at least keep it on these surfaces, but not put on the round geometry, because FMX or flexible modeling has a way to remove or keep the round. So little predictable behavior, I would say, when it comes to editing geometry in FMX and how your divide surface still functions, right? On the regular hole and pattern, there are some really nice enhancements that would help. For example, in the hole command, the simple hole finally has the ability to add a node automatically, including parameters. Now, this is very useful, I think, from an ECAD-MCAD collaboration standpoint. You could edit the default HOL files they may have for these, and you could add your own custom parameters if you'd like, right? That's the advantage. So that's with the standard holes, we used to have this, but with simple holes, we never had it. So that's a nice little hole enhancement, I'm thinking. So let me go and kind of quickly show that one. If I go into, I'll just, just a simple hole for now, right? It's a simple part with the, it's not a standard hole, as you can see. I just use a simple hole, flat or drilled. Back in Creo 9 and earlier releases, if you do a standard one, and if you go to your properties, then you get these parameters, you get your node, which can be customized. Most companies customize it because they may not like or prefer the default PTC one. I've done it myself during my industry days, editing the .hol file and all that. But now with the simple one, when you do a simple, the node is not grayed out anymore. It's still there, but I can go to properties, and this is new in Creo 10. You can do add parameters, and since it's a flat, simple hole, not a drilled hole, it gives you the hole type, drill depth, and drill parameters. This allows me to go turn on the nodes in here, and now they do have, for a simple hole, the node. Not only that, I should be able to select parameters of the hole, and they do have those as parameters. Now, if I go into edit definition on this guy and say I want to go to a drilled hole, then you see I get the drill point angle as an additional parameter. So depending on what hole type, is it flat or drilled, you get these additional parameters. So how are these being controlled is if I go into, let's say I'm going to go minimize my Creo real quick here. Wherever you have your launch icon of Creo, right? If you go and right click and do an open file location, it should take you to your installation folder. There under common files, just the good old text folder, there should be a text folder, and there should be a whole folder. And this is where by default PTC keeps those HOL files, right? That can be customized. We encourage not to touch these and add new ones, obviously, right? But then these two are new, simple drilled hole and simple flat hole. So if I open one of them right now and say open with Notepad, for example, now you kind of know why that worked, because they do have the callout format even for simple holes now. And you can keep adding additional parameters if you'd like, right? For example, from an ECAD-MCAD collaboration standpoint, you want the type of hole. Is it going to be with plating, without plating? That could be something you could customize and add to it. But these are supplied by default, which is new in Creo 10.0. So let me just get back to where I was actually. There you go. So let's see here. Do a time check. So we'll go for it. Yeah, go through a few more. One big one is the pattern. I really like how they have better options when you have nested pattern or when you do pattern for pattern. You're able to include in the number of instances of as a relation-based driver to create variable patterns like this. Before we could do variable patterns, but now they have parameters built in, right? As soon as you create a pattern, you should see PTC actual pattern members, PTC total pattern members. This is probably my initial pattern, and this is my pattern of a pattern. So those parameters could be used in a callout, for example. You could write relations. It's almost like using a TriStar relation in variable section sweep. During creation of that pattern of a pattern, you could use the number of instances as an increment, in fact, right? And they have some, maybe I'll quickly show you what I'm talking about here. The more examples you see, the better. And all of these, many of these, I'll point you to some resources where you can, the help file, they have information about all this, and there's even a document on what's new, and some videos from PTC's help is a lot better than before. That's where many of these information I myself gathered, actually. So if I go to the whole, and if I go to the pattern here, just a quick example here. So at this point of time, I do have, for example, a pattern here with 4 extrudes, pretty straightforward. I could go to that pattern, right click, and if I go to parameters, starting Creo 10, you're going to see this PTC actual pat members. As you can see, the value is set to 4, right? Because the 4 the number of instances, and you can use it in relations, etc., right? Or even in a call out with your feature ID. Now, I could go to that pattern, and I'm going to go to a pattern of a pattern, which could be done before. However, now when I'm going to select this, right? Now, before I do even that, the way this pattern was done, the way this feature was done, we added some design intent into this. If I go and edit this, that particular, you could see how I'm having it right on that curve. I create a point, and then that's kind of what is used as a reference and all that. That's kind of how I'm making it, follow through that curve. So that's design intent that you could do even before. But when I do a pattern of a pattern, I'm going to select that same one, and maybe I want to have, I don't know, so many of them, right? Let's say I did this, and all it's doing right now is it's kind of creating a pattern of a pattern, as you can see. And there it is, right? Pretty straightforward so far. When I go to my properties or the parameters, there's the total number of total pat members and actual ones, right? Anything, if you may have removed something, it will remove from that number, right? If you disable any pattern, right? Now, one of the things you could do, which is pretty cool, is I could go add, just instead of adding additional variable dimensions, I could go say, I want to use this 4 extrudes number, right? What I did here was I've included the number of patterns as an increment, which I can change. So maybe I want to have, 1 for each one. I want to have 1, and I hit OK. And now what's happening is it's going to increment the number by 1. So why am I getting a shape like this? If you think about it, it's going and it started off with a 4, and then it's going to go 5, and then it's going to go 6, and it's incrementing each time by 1, right? Now, this is nice. So what I could do, I could go back and redefine this and say, maybe I want to increment that by 4. And what that does, it starts with 4, 8, 12, etc., to get me that, it's creating a lot of instances there, and maybe I should have been as a geometry pattern, it would have been faster, but it should, just bear with me for a second here, it should come up anytime here. Let's see, it's almost through its patterning, and so you can also use it as a relation. And there it is. So if you look at my pattern group now, so it's like, okay, there's my first, the 4, and then it becomes 8, and then it becomes, you see how I'm using that as an increment, right? Now, what I could do with this is, instead of, a better example than this, if I go, I'll open up another one here. Simple 2 pattern, right? It's just 2 holes that are patterned in here. I can go pattern of this pattern, and then maybe I'll just select some, just give it some increments. So I got 2. Right now, it's just creating the same one, pretty straightforward, like currently what you have. But I could go add as an additional item, and that item can be used to define in a relation inside of this feature itself. So that's new. So I'm not typing in, give me 2, 3, 4 like I did earlier. I'm going to edit, and I can add a relation here. So I could just say, and it's giving me like, okay, you could use IDX1, which is the pattern, instance index in the first direction, second direction, and also the resultant dimension that needs to be driven using that. So I could just do a simple if-else statement here. For example, I want to go IDX1 is going to be, let's say, if it's going to be less than 4, I want the member to be, let's say, 2. And we'll do a quick end-if in here. So maybe I'll just quickly copy paste that. And maybe I'll, if it's going to be equal to 4. So I'm kind of controlling based on the number during the pattern, it's going to be different. And almost like going to do a variable pattern, you will see it, right, from a number of instances standpoint. We'll just set this to, maybe I don't want, when it's 4, I don't want you to increment at all the number. And here, maybe I want you to decrease it. So all I have said is, okay, less than 4, make sure it's incrementing by 2. If it's equal to 4, then it's 0, and otherwise you should decrease. And I don't know if I made any typos. Let me just go verify that. Looks good. And there it is. And if I go right now, if I go edit, you see it has 2. If I say I want to have 8 patterns, and what is it doing is, remember my relation, right? If it's equal to 4, I want you to keep it the same. If it's less than 4, I want you to increment by 2. If it's more than 4, I want you to decrease by 2. So imagine kind of using these and using an eval graph, and you could write some really good relations. So patterns have been improved. It's my point with this, right? You could even use eval graphs to control that. So those are the core modeling areas. I know you're, let's see, hitting time here. Maybe I'll probably in 5 minutes, we'll probably do a quick Q&A. We can also see the chat areas or any questions. But a few other things that might be helpful is in assembly mode, nothing per se other than the restructure, reorder. They give you better visibility between the reorder and restructure. At least you kind of know, or if you wait for a second while you restructure or reorder, it should give you a prompt if do you really need the reorder or do you need the restructure? For example, what I mean by that is, maybe I'll show you a quick one here. If I could open up some assembly here. So I got an assembly in here. And then if I go to, for example, my tree itself looks better with these lines. I like how you can, that can be configured too, by the way. If you go to your file options, and if you go to your Windows settings, they do have an option, show navigation tree lines. If I uncheck that, this will look like Creo 9 and prior, right? This is how it was, right? But I could go, let me just go back to that guy right there. And if I go under Windows settings and turn on that, I like that, like those lines that show up. So clearly, it's a little bit better visibility, I would say. Now, as for reorder, typically you drag things, right? As you can see here, right? I'm dragging it down, but as I cursor over and wait for a second there, you are getting a little confirmation here. Let me kind of pause this. Can you see, it's nice that it's telling, okay, you are, in fact, do you want to restructure into it or not, right? So that's really nice where as I'm dragging through, it's telling me with that little cursor that you want to restructure in there, right? So maybe I'm going to put it somewhere here for now, right? And it's giving me a confirmation, right? Yes or no, that's good. Maybe I'm going to do the same thing on a part, but when I do it on a part, am I going to restructure or reorder? I got a cursor there for a while, and then it kind of expands it. Now, am I going to go into this guy, right? Again, I wait there for a second, it kind of expands it, and maybe I want to put it in here. So better, I've seen many customers, they would try to do a reorder, but they accidentally do a restructure, you know what I mean, right? And it's a better visibility overall there. You no longer have the group name when you do groups. I think that was redundant. It just tells you everybody knows it's a group, so it doesn't tell you group anymore, just with the name. And then you can close your model tree can be quickly closed. Your multiple trees, like your design tree and your quilt body tree, etc. Right there, they can be quickly closed compared to before using the closed tree option there. Cabling has been improved, so wherein I like the cabling tree now, the bundle tree, the cable tree, and the connectivity tree. In fact, let me open up a cabling assembly to kind of show you that. If I have, let's see here, if I go into, I'll just go back to my list real quick. And if I go to cabling, I just did a very, very simple demo example here I have with a few networks done. And, you can go, okay, fixed style here. I have a few bundles and just a few wires and cables routed. Did you notice one thing in Creo 10 is immediately when I open up a cabling or enter cabling mode, I got a split tree now. That's really nice, I think. Before, it was, all the way in Creo 9. Let me just kind of resize it if I can get it. The harness part is still there, and everything was in here under the harness. I like, how you can, I can just minimize that model tree, and there's 3 options now. You have your cable tree, your bundle tree, and your connectivity here, right? So, and I can expand these. I can go to my bundles. I can go to the connectivity. When I go to the cable tree, and if I say I want to go expand all, I like how it gives you the spool, the cable location. In fact, this might be helpful where it's almost like its own tree where I can, like before, I can go add columns, for example, from to. I'm interested to know the from to information of this, right? Or maybe I can, for each one, better visibility, I think. I like that. Or if you do the bundle, for example, the bundle view, maybe expand all. Maybe when I look at bundles, I might be, maybe I go to my columns and maybe I want to show the diameter. And that might be some good information that I might want to see when I'm doing my bundle. There's your bundle name and what are the wires included in that bundle, for example, right? And finally, I can go into my columns and come up the diameter and go into, let's see here, the last one, the connectivity, where if I expand the connectivity, it's nicely showing your connectors, and which ports it's using, right? Even the port names. So I really like this separate tree of cabling, right? It's a good enhancement in my view. And if I go to my columns and I can just go and say maybe I want to look at the designations. Yeah, I know I can look at the rough designators here, but it's nice to have a look at the connectors. The wire info, the from to, port information, everything right in that single tree there, right? So, right. So I think, let's see. Get back to this. So all the rest of it are some surfacing, a few examples. We're a minute here, but I'll just go through these. There are some minor improvements in warping and drawings. There's really just no enhancement per se, but you should see better performance when you retrieve large assembly drawings because their config option, create drawing sheet thumbnails, which was there before, has been set to yes. Before it was on retrieval, which means now it's only going to retrieve it on demand, right? Unlike before where the thumbnails for the sheets were being created, and that is part of one of the reasons why it was slow. So the config option might help. It's set to yes by default, so hopefully you should see some improvements there. Some improvements in MBD where you could relate symbols and other annotations. You could create an offset, you can relate them and unrelate them so they move along with other annotations. When you, on data exchange, when you export a step AP242, which is there before, it used to miss those additional references for dimensioning that you're using, and now both for export and import, it should handle that pretty well and starting Creo 10. A few things in surfacing, but I know we are kind of running out of time here. So what I'll do, I'll jump to my last few ones just to point out some of the useful resources that would help. Like if you are going to try, or many of you may have already tried Creo 10. If you're on maintenance, you should be able to download it and get an updated license file. Provided you check your Windchill compatibility and all that. But when you launch Creo 10, there is a what's new info. There's read this first. Both those are quite helpful, I think. Those are PDFs. In fact, if I go to Creo right now and go to a file, help, and then go to reference and do a little what's new, just open up the what's new, and it gives you pretty much in all modules. You can even go through, okay, in fundamentals, what happened, right? And simulation, what are the changes in part modeling, what happened in here, the pattern. Some of the examples I talked about, are listed here too. So that's a nice little reference in there. But yeah, and then what else? In the help file, there is what's new, like tutorials, or I should say videos. Like that's one of the examples I used, to show you that pattern and also show you that little relation that I had written. It's all in the what's new. So again, if you go to Creo, there's a next to the graduation hat icon, there should be a little question mark, or you hit the F1 key. It should take you to a web page like this, depending on your browser. And then there's this what's new, and this is the what's new between Creo 10 and 9, right? Of course, if you're interested more in the delta between 8 and 9 or 8 and 10 and things like that, then of course you may have to go directly to, let me go into PTCs. You can just Google Creo Help Center, right? When you do that, and some of you may be on different releases. The first hit you get is Creo Help Center. There is Creo 10, 9, 8. So if you go to 10, 9, 8, I'm just opening all those in different windows. You can see what's happening here. I'm getting the what's new of Creo 10 compared to 9. Here I'm getting Creo 9 compared to 8, all the information. In fact, PTC also has some YouTube videos these days of, this is 9 to 8. They may have some YouTube videos with some better explanations of what's new. So I also encourage you to take a look at that. But yeah, that is see here. And you can also—
Everybody, we've got about 1 minute. Does anybody have a quick question? Some people might have 1 o'clock meetings. So thank you so much. Does anybody have a quick question?
You see, also there's a chat question. Let me read a couple of them in there. Are the pattern, for the pattern element number parameters accessible outside of the feature I need something? Yes, absolutely, right? So all you do is, there's a feature ID for the pattern. We all know how to get the feature ID. So you can, so for example, that pat underscore, PTC underscore pat numbers, that's the parameter name. It's a feature parameter. So you would go, colon, put a colon FID and put the feature ID next to it. And yeah, you're able to access it outside, maybe for callouts or for any other relations. Yeah, that's a big enhancement there. The next question is, any improvements related to assemblies and multi-body? Yeah, I think multi-body is what I was covering, but in assemblies, no, they don't. They've not exposed multi-body in assemblies as of yet. Can export an assembly to a Creo part with components exposed as multi-bodies inside the part? Not yet. You can export an assembly to, okay, no, you don't have that as of yet, right? In Creo 10, you don't have. Any other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask, or if you, I did see 2 questions in the chat. Unless Deb, is there any other questions I missed? I think there are only 2 questions, right, in the chat. I can see.
I haven't looked, but we probably should end this. And then if somebody else has a more detailed question, they could contact you individually.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We're going to wrap. This is a ton of information. And like I said, I should get the recording in the next couple of hours, and then we'll clean it up and put it on YouTube over the weekend. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again in a month.
All right. Thank you. Thanks all. Have a great weekend. Thanks.
You too.